You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo.
Well, we find ourselves at the end of another year.
Yeah, that went by fast.
What just happened? So yeah, we are on the brink of ushering in 2025. So in the spirit of just end of the year, self-reflection, looking back, seeing where you came from, we thought it would be a good use of time to survey the best, the brightest, the most impactful moments, some of the most challenging statements from the guests that we had on this last year. So we've highlighted a couple of these that we're going to go through today and kind of, extract out the hard-hitting principle there or something that was of note that we think would be of value to you guys. Just unrelated to that, though, in 2024, what a busy year. We have a new president coming into office. That was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Economically, found some challenges. Inflation, I think, smacked us all in the face a little bit. But it's been a good year for the Reinvest Podcast.
Interest rates almost touched 8% this year.
Whoa.
For residential stuff.
How funny. Anybody who was like 50 or older, they always want to look back and say, well, when I was buying a home in the 80s, interest rates were 19%.
It's just been a wild ride.
It's been a wild ride.
And now they're back down to like 6.5%, so.
Hopefully we can live there and you can buy some great deals here in 2025. So before we jump into a new year, let's look back. Episode number 66, Brandon Weiss. What a unique and a different guest that we had on than some of our normal guests.
Yeah, well, he's not really, he is a real estate guy. He's getting into real estate. But that wasn't really the bulk of his story. He was just a beast of a man that had a great mindset and was able to really purpose himself to do some hard things.
So if you're listening to this and you maybe not remember episode 66, Brandon Weiss is one of 13 people that hiked what is known as the Triple Crown. That's the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail in under a calendar year.
Yeah, within a calendar year. And pretty wild, some of the stories.
How many miles was that?
It was a lot of miles, thousands of miles, thousands and thousands of miles. It was a lot of hiking. And I just remember one of the things that he put, I think, on the back of his book, like one of those clickbaity things, was more people have been on the moon.
Yeah.
Than have done this.
Wow.
So it was just, and in the podcast, he told some of his stories, and I know, Garrett, you bought his book, and he tells the whole story in his book.
Yeah.
But just the wild stuff he put his body through.
I think one of the reasons we brought him onto the episode is because, anybody you follow, if you're listening influencer-wise, I feel like there's such an inseparable correlation between how you push yourself physically and then also how that translates to mental, kind of pushing those boundaries, and then also success in general. And you don't just wake up and on accident go do something that only 13 people in history have done. So either way, there are principles to mind there. I like what he said. He said that I wanted to take myself to the brink of what I was capable of. And you have to go to the brink to see what your limits even are. Because if you're always stopping short, I think it's David Goggins that says, like, when you quit, usually you've only used about 40% of what you have mentally or physically, which is wild that you're leaving another 60% on the table. So
that is wild.
Episode 69 was Jared Stern. So Jared, good buddy down in Cincinnati with S&S Capital. They've prolific real estate investment company down there. One of the things they're known for is how they have streamlined their operations.
Yeah.
Which is very, very, very difficult to do at a high level.
Yeah, and he said his brother, was a big proponent of, putting those systems in place. And they were one of the first people that we had kind of heard him talk a little bit more detail about when they do a renovation, even going before they get to the point of doing a unit turn or a renovation, they already have all the materials ordered, all the contractors lined up,
on
and
site.
They put a pallet in the unit in the order that they would need to pull the materials off in a place that would allow them to still put down flooring and stuff like that. And they just had it down to a T. They were he was the one that had said that they were they realized their contractors were going to get energy drinks
right
off the job. And so in order to keep things more efficient, they would just pre-buy them energy drinks so they don't even have to leave. And even little details like that, if you do, if you're saving enough time here and there, but you're able to do that over the course of a year, over the course of 1,000 units, you're saving a lot of money for your investors.
Do you remember what their average vacancy time was on a unit?
No, but it was like really super low.
It was like days. Yeah. Not weeks, but days, which that, again, doesn't happen by accident. And it's because they understood their business at a granular level and where things were falling through the cracks. One of the cool things that they implemented, and this is, if you have employees, one of the challenges that you'll have to manage is people's time and efficiency, because they are a resource in your company, and it's very difficult to control people. And so I like how they found a way to incentivize their employees while also increasing productivity. So I think it was their leasing managers that they, for every Google review that they got, that translated to paid time off that they could cash in.
Good Google review they got.
Yeah.
I think if they got a 1-star, I don't think they would have.
No paid time off there.
I don't think they would have.
But it did. It just kind of put their values in line with, making things more productive. I thought that was a really cool
and he
hack.
said the leasing managers were like getting aggressive, trying to get Google reviews, handing out cards that said, hey, leave me a Google review. Here's my...
Because who doesn't want more paid time off, right?
Business page. Yeah, that was a good idea.
Episode 83, Joe Fairless. That was a cool moment for us. We had been to Joe's event last few years, best ever real estate conference. Obviously, I've seen and heard of Joe. It was cool to have him on the podcast. One of the things I want to talk about was his smaller pocket story.
Yeah, he had a doozy of a first deal. His first syndication, he had told it in the podcast. So if you ever want to go back and listen to that, do that. It's episode 83. But he talked about a deal he bought in Cincinnati and just how he made every mistake. He made every mistake in the book, from having the previous owner put in bad tenants,
right,
to not realizing that the property was a value add property. He thought he was buying a stabilized asset, which, if you're listening to that, you're like, well, duh. But it's like you just don't know what you don't know. And when you're starting out, there's such a steep learning curve in this business.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the only way to really learn is to do it. And he just bit off like a big chunk. He said his occupancy from the time that he inherited the property went from 90% to 70%.
Yeah.
Most people don't budget for that kind of vacancy.
No. Yeah. Well, and he had to probably get out a lot of bad tenants, but yeah, he tells, some more in-depth stories in there about that. But, it's just, that would crush a lot of people and make them quit. And so it's just a good lesson to be like, man, hard things happen. You can learn from them and you can move on and still build a successful business. And your early failures in your career, or failures in general, don't squash your chances of being successful. And one of the things that wasn't even from our podcast that Anthony Vicino had said was the only thing separating you from the guy next to you is he, or the successful guy that you're looking at, is he standing on a bigger pile of failures than you.
Right.
He's done enough. He's made more mistakes, learned more than you, and therefore has become more successful and gone further. So I really like that. I think Joe Fairless is like a good example of that. And now he has this monster company.
Well, everybody sees where he is today. You see the $2.5 billion of assets under management. You see the prestige and just the professionalism of Ashcroft Capital. But you forget that he had a first deal, and he didn't just come in with like this very packaged, business plan. He had to learn it through the reps and climb and learn all the same things we have to. One of the things that was notable about him is you see what someone's made of when they're in the valley. And I think that is even a relevant message for today. A lot of real estate investors, you're seeing headline stuff of people who they maybe aren't doing the right things now. They're doing fraudulent things. And when everything was going well, they seemed like good investors, good people. But now it's like they're being squeezed, not enough money, rents are, stagnated, interest rates are higher. And are these people going to follow through with what they said they were going to do? Joe repaid all of those investors that had lost money. And he paid them a 14% annualized return
Out of his pocket.
To make them whole. And I think part of that is seeing the bigger picture, and then also taking ownership of a problem. And so that was really cool. Give us the next one.
Episode 92, we had Angel Sanchez on to talk about running short-term rentals as a business. And that was a good episode. He kind of gave his story of buying short-term rentals in the Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area.
That was our most listened to episodes from this last year.
Yeah, Angel, if you're listening, that was our most listened to episode this year.
Which was really cool.
So that was cool. So, he kind of gave the evolution of his story. And one of the cool little tidbits that he gave in that was just kind of like looking back, good lesson, was that he kind of realized that he could just raise his prices and lower his occupant. It would, naturally lowered his occupancy, but he was still making just as much or more money as if he would lower his prices and have a 90 or 95% occupancy. So it was less wear and tear on the property and, less times needed to go in and clean it. And
he was saying that was kind of the sweet spot for some of their properties was that 65%
occupancy.
Yep. I think Alex Hormozy kind of talks about that in some of his business principles of increasing your membership fee, your product, cost, and lowering maybe who you're offering that to. When you're doing that, your pricing is staying the same, but all of the operational cost to service those clients is less.
Yeah.
And so that was cool to see that applied to the short-term rental. Angel's doing it at a really high level, which I think is really cool. So if you're listening and you're interested in short-term rentals, listen to the full episode. He does a great job breaking down return on equity, how to evaluate different markets, how to actually operate a property efficiently, and maybe don't have to pay the dumb tax that he's had to pay. Episode 96, Tyler Goebel. This was, I think, titled something to the effect of investing on mission or investing with purpose. And I first found him on LinkedIn, and he was talking about how he is a real estate investor, and his goal is to end human trafficking. And so that really caught my eye because, I feel like a lot of people on LinkedIn, it's just kind of, I don't know, more professional, or they're not really leading with what's the passion,
Yeah, unless the passion is to create a
multi-million-dollar
company. And then
I'm passionate about making a successful company, but his is actually passionate about something that had, there was a lot of need in ending this. And so we reached out to him. Really great guy. So we were talking about how have you found some of the opportunities from a business perspective that you have? And he had made a statement. He said, it's good for a man to put his hand to the plow while he's young. I think it was a proverb from the Bible. And he had taglined that with doing the right things long enough opens up opportunity. And it's really people first. And that's been a theme, I think, for us. It's been cool to reach out to other guests who have also made that a priority in their businesses. That when you put people first, opportunity follows that. I will say it is very difficult to put your faith in that message. It sounds great when someone's already made it. But when you're the one that's scrapping and grinding, it feels very hard to set aside that self-preservation mindset of like, well, I don't really have a lot of resources or capacity to entertain other people. I'm trying to build my own business.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this, that either it's conviction from a principle perspective or conviction from faith that really leads you to do that. But it really is true. It is true. And just not to get all preachy, you don't want to be the guy that gains the whole world but loses his soul.
Right.
And so if you can't add value to people along the way in how you're trying to find success for yourself, I would caution you to maybe reconsider how you're doing something. So it was cool to hear him talk about how his whole life story really has been built on that principle.
And one of the things I liked about that episode and about talking with him is how he's utilizing and treating his VAs, and just a passion to be like, man, I can, my virtual assistants, these employees I'm taking from around the world, I'm impacting their lives by the job, the opportunity, the relationship that I'm giving them. And he was even giving them ownership in his companies that he was building with them.
Right. His
and just like assistant. How that's changing their lives and building wealth for their family. And just like, if you can have that, that mindset of like, man, how can you value your employees and really change their lives? And it's not just about you making money, but it's about, man, how many people can we take with us?
Yep.
And I don't know, I just really like that. I really appreciated that mindset.
And again, nothing happens on accident.
Yeah.
And so you can say that. He even said this in the episode, that if you have core values and you have to think about what they are when you're telling them to people, they probably don't mean much to you.
Yeah.
And so they really are putting their money where their mouth is in terms of integrating what's valuable to them in the company and the way they treat their employees. Give us the next one, Seth.
Episode 100. This was our celebratory episode with Brandon Turner. And he is, the Better Life podcast. Better Life Tribe is his thing now that he's running, and he has Open Door Capital, but he was formerly the host of Bigger Pockets. And so anyway, that was awesome. Cool moment for us to be able to get him on.
That was cool.
He kind of gave his story, shared some cool stuff with us. One of the things I learned kind of looking back on that episode, thinking about it, is like Brandon was just a normal guy, and he wanted to get in real estate, kind of saw the value in it, like a lot of people, just kind of started with a small property. And he did those small things and the right things long enough and got, purposely to get in the right rooms with the right people. And he just like rinsed and repeated that for a long time. And he talked about when he started writing on the forums and blogs for Bigger Pockets. And I mean, it wasn't making any money.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? And when he started the podcast,
didn't he reach out to, was it Scott Trench or one of the founding guys, and kind of put his hat in the ring and didn't get a response?
Yeah. The first time he had reached out to Josh Dorkin. Yeah, he didn't get a response. And Josh Dorkin ended up, I think, reaching out to him later once Brandon's blog, he had said kind of
had some success
and kind of reached out to him. It was like, hey, you should write for me and, whatever. And even when he got the job with Bigger Pockets, it didn't sound like it was a great opportunity from a financial standpoint. But Brandon knew that it was getting him around the right group of people.
Yeah.
And that is like, if you can build the muscle, flex the muscle of not always going after the short-term gain, if you can, have some self-control and really plan for the long term, and maybe it's some short-term pain for some long-term, gains and some really exponential growth in the long term, you really need to learn to flex that muscle and to not be so impulsive, because it would have been really easy for him to say, no, I can spend my time, and make more money doing X, Y, and Z in my life, whether it's working on your own investment property or whatever. But he was willing to sacrifice some of that. So I was cool. It was doing the right things long enough, even if they're small, even if they're not making you money, and that will help you get to where you want to be in the long run. So
there's a great book called The Dip by Seth Godin, and it really talks about this principle of you start the new thing, you're excited, hey, I'm stepping out, I'm doing it. I'm going to invest in real estate, or I just started a new business or a new job. Stepping out and, I'm 1099, I'm self-employed, whatever it is. And the initial excitement kind of gives you that boost of momentum and motivation. And then there's the dip. And the dip is, wow, this is going to take a lot of time. Wow, I don't know how to do half the stuff I'm trying to, set out to accomplish. And you see your lack, you see where you're not and how far you have to get. And just know that is like, it's not if you experience that, it's when you experience that. And I feel like that dip kind of idea, I have seen that play out in my own life over the last decade, probably 5 or 6 times. And every time you're surprised because you're like, oh man, am I doing the right thing? And you're always going to have that. Social media they're not going to do a great job connecting the dots for you of who somebody was before they were successful, because that person just wants to portray who they are today and get you to buy their thing. So it was cool to talk to Brandon and see normal guy, reached out to a couple in his church who knew they had an apartment complex. They watched him for a year before they ever agreed to sell to him.
Yeah.
And he just kept doing his thing, kept his head down, moved in the direction he thought he needed to go, bought an apartment complex. And it was a 10 or 16 unit or something like that.
16 unit or something.
So that was his beginning. And then didn't stop. Didn't kick his feet up. Oh, I bought a 16 unit. I'm fine. No, he kept doing the right thing, compounded that in, threw it back in. So very, very cool. Episode 103. This was Valentina Brega. She was came into the United States, kind of through her being from a different country, it opened up really this need that she saw. And the need was connecting the global workforce to US-based, primarily, companies, and being the bridge to kind of bring virtual assistants more into the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And give us a couple of thoughts. I know that you've obviously experienced that on our team, setting that up for us, and then we got to talk to her.
Yeah, so their company's name is Hire Train VA, and essentially they help, find and vet VAs. They do a really good job vetting VAs, qualified people, and then, you pay, a setup fee essentially, and then they basically hand that virtual assistant over to you and say, hey, this is your employee now. And they help train you on how to use the VA and how to keep the VA accountable and all that stuff. But one of the great things that she had brought up and that she had really talks about in our podcast and in other podcasts I've listened to her on is like, these are actual people. Like, these are people from across the world that have families and
they're intelligent.
Yeah. and they're
capable.
And they're capable. And they want to feel like they're part of something too. Just like when we go to a job and if we're working somewhere, we don't want to just waste our time and feel like we're just pushing paper. We want to be a part of something, and we like the community of work, and we like to feel like we fit in. And she's like, it's the same thing. So you treat these people, these virtual assistants, like they are part of your team, and because they are part of your team. And if you want to create a successful company that has a good culture, that has good employees that stay, that's the kind of stuff that you got to build. And so it works the same way with virtual assistants. It works the same way with anybody in your team, in your business or that works for you. You need to create the culture of teamwork, of making them feel like they're part of the team, like they are part of the vision that you have. And is your vision big enough for your employees? Is your vision big enough for those people to jump on board that train and to really feel like they're part of something? So
I think even with us going through this in the last year, one of the things that Valentina shared that we had context for firsthand experience was we didn't really know how to communicate some of what we were asking of that individual. And so it forced us to systematize and operationalize our business. Just that alone was massively important because it helped us really get down to more of a granular level of how do we make money? I knew how we made money before that, but I didn't even know what the heck we were doing. But like, how do you communicate this to somebody else and getting it from your head to someone else? And that translation is the difference between being a solopreneur and then moving into an employer. And that was a big transition for us this last year. One that everybody needs to make if you want to scale a business. So last one we have on the list here is Brian Spear. And Brian is mobile home park investor, awesome company. Just an energetic guy to talk to. Like, he carries a really great presence about him. He's been through Dan Sullivan's coaching program. You can tell he's invested a lot in his own professional development and skill set. One of the things that was notable about him is he was a D1 Kentucky baseball player. And I always love rubbing shoulders with successful college athletes because, again, it's kind of like when, you saw this from an employer perspective, when you're reviewing someone's resume, their qualifications aren't just like what their work experience are. If they have a college degree, that says something about them. If you have a college athlete that spent 4 years at that level playing athletics, that says something about them. And so he really broke down some of those skill sets and lessons that he learned, brought them into the business realm, and how those are serving him now. One of the things he said was this phrase, preppertunity, from the coach Ron Polk. He said, preppertunity is preparing for opportunity in advance of your opportunity. And so you have to put the preparation in now before the opportunity is here. And that's a big, again, it kind of goes back to the Brandon Turner thing. Are you willing to do the things you know you should be doing before you've seen the outcome?
Yeah, when it feels like a grind, when it's boring, when it's just a drudge.
Lonely, monotonous.
It's easy to do the hard things if you're like coming into a lot of success or money and you can see the tangible results of being like, oh my gosh, like this is this is the right thing to do because look at all this activity. You know what I mean? And you can kind of look in the rearview mirror and see all this stuff happening. But when you are just on freaking I-75 and you have 120 miles stretch before you get to your destination and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is the most boring drive. But you get there, you get to your destination and you're like, oh wow, it was worth it. And so it's just kind of preparing. And if you don't prepare your car in advance, guess what? You're going to run out of gas.
Come on.
Come
on. We're talking mechanics here.
Seeing if I could make something work there. But,
it was a bit of a stretch.
No, but I mean, yeah, it's just so important. Again, it's going back to, are you doing the right things today, and can you do them consistently until you find success?
I think if you're, so I'm 31, Seth's 28.
Yes.
28. So we're younger on the young side of our professional career. And I can't speak to somebody who's older than me because I don't know what it's like to be older than me. But if you're our age or younger, I just want to let you know that we are like culturally preconditioned to everything in our society. Everything's a broad statement, but a lot of things are trying to get you to do the easy thing, the path of least resistance, the convenient thing. And no one is going to help you figure out how to endure, persevere like that. You just have to go find that. You have to do that. You have to find people who are doing it, like this podcast, like Brian Spear. And it's something that you're always fighting is taking the easy thing, looking at here's the crazy part. A lot of the time you don't even know when you're looking at an opportunity. 10 people, a dozen people, how many people would have looked at what Brandon Turner had in front of him and would have seen that as for what it was, right? The potential that it had.
Yeah.
And to be fair, maybe he didn't even see the full perspective of it. He just took the next step. And so, everybody wants what someone successful has, but no one wants to do what it took to get there.
Yeah.
And you just get around the right people who are going to be honest about what their success is built upon, because there are no shortcuts.
Well, here is to a great 2025. If you guys are listening, we have a lot of good stuff in store for this next year. We are excited about this next year. We are actually going to be doing our annual kind of goal setting for our team here coming up next week, and so we're excited for that. So, pro tip, you guys should set goals, because if you don't have goals, you're not going to get where you want to go. So think about that as you're coming to this new year. What are the things you want to accomplish? What are the things that you want to strive for in your business, in your personal life, in your family, in your marriage, whatever that would be, and get those things down on paper and set big goals for yourself so that way you have something to chase after and so you have something to drive you coming into this next year.
The one thing I would tagline on that, Seth, is this is a personal note on the goal side of things, has been accountability.
Doesn't work.
Goals are great. If you don't have a way to hold yourself accountable, they're really worthless.
Yeah.
And everybody says this. I don't really know how to necessarily help somebody with this because I've been in kind of accountability relationships that haven't worked but have been well-intentioned. But I think what it comes down to is finding somebody who is as serious as you are or more serious and using, like doubling down on that relationship, because those are hard to come by. That accountability is a good thing, and it helps you be honest with yourself. So I would parlay that with the goal setting thing, and we will see you guys next year.
As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.